ओम नमः श्री यतिराजाय विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. We were discussing the 17th sutra of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, where we were discussing the four different types of samadhi. Samadhi is a stage after dharana and dhyana. Dharana is concentration, dhyana is meditation, the seventh step, and the eighth step is samadhi. So, what does this samadhi means? It has been divided, as I told you, into two varieties. One variety is the samprajnata, and the other is asamprajnata. In samprajnata samadhi come all the powers of controlling nature. So, the first one, samprajnata, it has totally four varieties, and it the samprajnata samadhi, where you get the powers to control nature, it's a gross kind of samadhi, and it is again divided into four varieties. We are not discussing the asamprajnata, we will come to it later. But before understanding what samprajnata is, or the categories of samprajnata samadhi, the first variety is called savitarka, where the mind meditates upon an object. The objects as we see it in nature, we see so many objects, and when we meditate on objects again and again, isolating it from other objects, that is known as savitarka samadhi. So what is savitarka samadhi? There are two sorts of objects. You can either meditate on prakriti or you can meditate on purusha. There are 24 categories of sankhya, and out of 25 categories of the sankhyas, but 24 are insentient categories of nature. They all form part of prakriti. So prakriti is divided into 24 parts. I'll show you what are the 24 categories of sankhya's, and you can meditate on any one of them, that is savitarka. But if you meditate on the sentient purusha, the conscious purusha, which is beyond prakriti, you have to remember this. The goal of Patanjali is to meditate on the sentient purusha, not the prakriti. But there are lower types of meditation, as I told you. When we meditate on any one of the 24 categories, what those 24 categories are, we will just discuss. Of the Sankhya's, Sankhya's divided the whole existence into 25 categories. One category is the Purusha, which is totally sentient. It is pure consciousness, the Brahman of Vedanta. If we want to compare it with something, it's the Brahman of Vedanta, the pure consciousness, which is permanent, which is eternal, which cannot be divided into any category. It's a whole, it's the eternal. Whereas the 24 categories which come under the Prakriti, Prakriti is the world as we see, the nature as we see around us, the nature that we see, the nature that we hear, the nature that we smell, the nature that we taste. So there are 5 sense organs, and we will discuss what these 24 categories are there. Because unless we know what these 24 categories are, we will not understand what Savitarka Samadhi is all about. So, as you remember, egoism, the will, and the mind have a common basis, the chitta. The chitta is the mind stuff. Remember, according to Patanjali or according to Sankhya philosophy, mind also is material. It's a finer material. It is made, the mind stuff is made of a subtle material. The gross material you see as the 5 tattvas, I will discuss that. That is the material universe, and the thing that is motivating or that is running or influencing. Just give me one second. I think the internet connection is a bit unstable. 1 minute. Yeah. So the I think all of you can hear and listen to me properly. Yeah. So so this part of yoga, this particular Savitarka Samadhi or whatever it is, it's based on the 24 principles of Sankhya, which I will discuss now. So these 24 principles of Sankhya, which form part of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, these are the 24 principles of Prakriti plus one principle, which is the conscious Purusha. So we are not discussing, when we discuss Savitarka Samadhi, we are discussing the meditation on the gross universe, the Prakriti, which is again divided into 24 categories. Now we'll discuss what they are. First is the pure consciousness, that is Purusha, that is 1 out of 25. The other 24 are Prakriti, Shakti, which is further divided. If you go below, the other divisions or the other categories are universal intelligence or Mahat. So there is a universal intelligence of which our minds are a part. Our intelligence, the buddhi or the intelligence which we have, it's part of the universal cosmic intelligence, which is known as Mahat and Buddhi. So individual level, it is Buddhi. Sum total of all the Buddhis, the refined intelligence, not just the mind, they are actually, it is known as Mahat. So in Sankhya, you can meditate on the mind, you can meditate on the categories, the different elements, the physical elements, will come to that. Then below Buddhi is the Ahankara, ego, or the in the Chitta, as you remember, there is this ego, there is the will and the mind. They have a common basis, the Chitta or the mind stuff. Now this mind stuff, according to Sankhya, is also a subtle form of material universe. It's a material universe, it's Prakriti, because it is Prakriti made of gunas, but it is subtler than the physical universe. That's why it also has sattva, rajas, and it is made of the three cosmic principles, the mind, the prana, the physical body. All of them are made of the same three gunas, which are sattva, the quality of equilibrium, clarity, and it is known as potential energy. Then we have rajas, the quality of movement, or it is intense attachment or intense detachment, raga and dvesha. And tamas is the quality of dullness or ignorance, darkness. So we described this, what tamas is, what rajas is, what sattva is. These are the other three categories. There are totally 24. First, as I told you, is the buddhi or the mahat, the sum total of buddhi, the cosmic buddhi or the cosmic intelligence. The finer element of the mind is the cosmic intelligence. So when you say a person evolves, his mind evolves, what actually happens is he goes to the state of buddhi, a finer kind of discriminative mind. Now that discriminative mind put together, which is seen more in evolved human beings. It's seen the very little buddhi is there in animals and lower human beings. So the higher a human being, the more he lives on the plane of buddhi, that is mahat. So also below mahat, there is this ego, below buddhi is ahankara, which is definitely above the elements. Definitely it is above the indriyas, the sense perceptions that we do. We see, we listen, we hear, we taste, all these things are combined, all these experiences are combined together by a faculty of the mind, which is also material, which is known as ahankara. So it is the ego which gives you a sense of perception. Without the ego, you can't say, I am seeing, I am looking at it. You will not get that unified experience. You see, you hear, you do so many things at a time. You at the same time you taste, you see the object which you are tasting, you taste it, you touch it. So the five senses, touch, taste, sight, seeing, hearing and smelling, all the five senses, the subtle senses and the gross senses, both are material. The gross senses are the ear, nose, eyes, mouth, and the skin. These are, but internally, the brain centers interpret interpret the sight that you see, the taste that you taste in your tongue, the smell that you smell, and the touch, the feeling that you get on your fingers or any other part of the body. So the whole skin is full of the sense organ which is known as touch, and then you have ears through which you can hear. But all these experiences, they go to the subtle senses, the five subtle senses, sukshma indriya. There are gross indriyas, there are sukshma indriyas. The sukshma indriyas or the subtle indriyas give you the idea of sense, smell, and all those things. But before that, to unify these experiences, there is this manas. So manas is one more category. Below the gunas, it is made of manas. So manas can be dark, tamasic. The mind can be rajasic, very active, very volatile, very, it can feel elated at one point of time and it can feel depressed at another point of time. And then there is a dark, ignorant mind, which is known as tamasic. Then we have, as I told you, just below that, 5 Gyanendriyas, that is, and 5 Karmendriyas. So the Gyanendriyas, the faculty of action. The Karmendriya means the faculties of action. For example, you have the faculty of speaking, that is the tongue or the mouth, that is known as vak. Pani means grasping, the hand. Then you have pada, walking. Then you have procreation. And then you have elimination, through the organ through which you eliminate all the unnecessary things. So these are the 5 karmendriyas, but there are 5 indriyas, the 5 gyanendriyas, which give rise to knowledge. There are karmendriya means those organs of your body which facilitate action. Whereas Gyanendriyas, the 5 categories of Gyanendriyas are the 5 which give you perceptions. So they are subtle, they are more subtle than the Karmendriya. So those are, first is the faculty of the Shrotra, that is hearing. Then we have Chakshu, the sight. Then we have Rasana, the taste. Then we have Grahana, the smell. So the 5 organs of Gyanendriyas which give a idea of that object, what that object is. Is it sweet? Is it bitter? Is it red in color? Is it so? The eyes, ears, all the 5 organs, Gyanendriyas, give you knowledge. Karmendriyas motivate you. Through the 5 karmendriyas, you do action in the gross world. So these 2 are gross indriyas. But at the same time, you will find it has to be unified. So manas is another category, the reactive mind, through which processes all this information, the seeing, the hearing, the talking, the sound, everything it processes, the hearing, and then it presents it to the mahat or to the manas. The manas, reactive mind, sends it further to the buddhi, which is the discriminative mind. Then it decides whether you are seeing a whether a thing is hot or whether it is cold. Should I eat it? Should I not eat it? What is the nature of this substance? All this discrimination, this thinking, which animals have, but at a very rudimentary level, but human beings have it at a much higher level. That is the function of the buddhi. So as you go evolve, the buddhi gets more and more importance, and the reactive mind or the manas is not, it gives you the input, but you don't react to the senses like an animal does. An animal, the moment it feels hungry, the Gyanendriya of the stomach, it feels hungry, it will run after a prey, it will catch it, it will eat it and satisfy its hunger. But human beings have more discriminative power. It can withstand hunger, it can decide whether it should eat or not, what happens if I eat more, what happens if I fast. So there are so many decisions which cannot be taken by the manas, the reactive mind. So a finer faculty of the mind, which is ego, motivates you to approach the buddhi, which is still finer. So the more subtle your mind, the more powerful it is. The buddhi is most powerful because it takes all the decisions. What is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. So all these capacities which a human being has, a evolved human being has, the more he evolves, he works more at the plane of buddhi, not at the plane of manas and the lower organs. So that is why we say, when we control the organs, when we decide not to be a slave of these lower categories of prakriti, then we raise ourselves from the animal level to the human level or to a divine level. The more higher we go, the more we identify with the Mahat, with the universal Buddhi. And that is what japa, that is what sadhana, that is what is the goal of all spiritual life. The goal of all spiritual life is to do meditate on higher and higher categories of Prakriti. If you can't meditate on the Purusha, which is, of course, we will come to that, but at least don't meditate on the lower objects. For example, last time we discussed that if you meditate on money, which is a gross thing, you will be thinking of money. So it's a category which falls within the gross elements. Now there are other elements, as I said, there are 24, the tanmatras, the objects of the senses: sound, sparsha, that is feel, rupa, that is form, the form that we see, the rasa, that is taste, and gandha, that is smell. And these are the tamasic and rajasic manifestations of the different categories. Then we have the mahabhutas, that is akasha, the space, ether; vayu, that is air, the gaseous state; the agni, that is the fire; then we have water and earth. So all the gross are made up of these 5 elements, tanmatras. That is how Sankhya has categorized it. So the more we go down the scale, the more we meditate on these things: the fire, the air, the objects, property, money, food, and all those things belong to the lower 10 categories. We using our, so the more we graduate from these lower categories to higher categories, we go nearer to the Purusha. That is the goal. So we begin with Savitarka Samadhi. The mind stuff or the manas takes in the forces of nature and projects them as thought. So the mind, the reaction to these outer objects. See, we perceive all these objects. We smell, we do so many things. And a reaction is given by the manas, the lower mind, the reactive mind, which projects them as thought. So there is this force, the force of motion, the force of gravitation, the force of illumination, the force of fire, all the forces that we see apart from matter in the universe. One of the forces is known as thought force. And this is very important to understand, because when we say we can't control, suppose in a room there is a lot of, you burn a fire and you say, I don't want the heat. You can't do it because you have burned the fire, you have burnt some material, and that will give rise to heat. So when the fire goes out of control, the heat also goes out of control and it burns everything on the way. So also the mind also is a kind of force. If we don't handle it properly, if we don't handle the manas with the help of ego and the buddhi, the higher the category, it can control the lower category. So manas can control the indriyas can control the tanmatras. So that is how we graduate from animals, from plants to animals, then from animals to we go to the higher categories, the animals to the plants, plants to the animals to the human being, where the role of the sense organs, the karmendriyas and the gyanendriyas is there, but it is less. The functioning of the buddhi or the higher category of prakriti is more. So when you say a person is full of wisdom, he takes a while to take decisions. He does not just surrender to his reactive mind. So these forces, if we know how to handle the force of the mind, just as we have to know how to intelligently handle heat, light, and all the forces, if you don't handle it properly, it can cause destruction. Atomic energy, if you can use it in a proper way, the forces of nature, it can be beneficial. It can be transformed into something beneficial. But if it goes haywire And if you don't know how to control the fire, if you don't know how to control the water, if you don't know how to control the earth, then these elements can create havoc. So also with the mind, there are these five indriyas, the five indriyas of sense, smell, the five indriyas of senses like the smell, the eyes, they are constantly bombarding the mind. And if the mind cannot control these senses, then it causes havoc. And the forces, just as the nature's forces disturb everything in the universe, in the cosmos, and unless you regulate it using science and technology, you regulate the forces. That is what science teaches us: how to regulate steam, how to regulate the nuclear force, how to regulate the electric force. When you regulate anything, when you control it, the benefits of science and technology come to you. But if you can't regulate that, they go out of control, and Prakriti can cause lot of destruction. The avalanches, there's so many other natural disaster you find as a result of not being able to control the natural forces. So that is why science and technology is so much obsessed with controlling natural forces. But somehow the nature, Prakriti, is more powerful than us and seems to control us rather than being controlled. So it is so difficult, just as it is difficult to control our organs, our mind, it's difficult to control the lower organs and also the material that is outside. You find it so difficult when it is cold. You have to burn something inside, you have to provide some heating, otherwise you will suffer. So also fighting against nature, fighting against COVID, fighting against organisms, fighting against poisons, fighting against the viruses, fighting against the bacteria. So even at the cellular level, the battle is going on between how to handle and control Prakriti to your benefit. So sometimes you win the war if you are very good at science. Maybe you can limit the amount of destruction that nature can uh, have on you, but there is a limit. Beyond a certain limit, we can't do. If there is a big earthquake, no matter how much you do, you may build earthquake proof houses, you may do so many things, but Prakriti finally wins the battle. So it's a constant battle, human beings, because it has aligned itself with the higher levels of existence, the buddhi. It is not helpless like the animal. Animal is helpless. When there is a forest fire, it cannot think of how to douse that fire. It will all perish. They will all perish because the animals have a limited capacity. The reactive mind is so prominent. That is why when you say a human being has to evolve, what he has to do is, otherwise he can be compared to a animal which has gone out of control. So an animal existence presupposes that we live at the level of the reactive mind. So this reactive mind forces us or controls us, controls controls our destiny rather than the buddhi. So if the reactive mind is sad, then we become sad. Our actions, our karmendriyas, our gyanendriyas, the sense organs, they all follow. So that depression goes down, and then we don't like to see certain things, we don't like to hear, we get depressed. It's not just the mind that gets depressed. It is that depression goes down to the sense organs. You don't feel like doing anything. You just feel like just lying down, or maybe uh, you get into a bout of depression. You don't know why the mind is behaving like that. Though we think it is only the mind, it's the sense organs also become inactive. They become dull, they become dark, and you cannot seem to make any sense out of life. That's why people commit suicide. They don't know what to do because the reactive mind has somehow gone out of control. So before things become worse, before the elements control you, before the karmendriyas, the gyanendriyas, and the elements, the gross elements, the the gross elements which lure the sense organs, like money, like alcohol, like drugs. There's so many varieties of material which causes a lot of disturb in the equilibrium of forces within us. You see, a simple sight of some money or some wealth, it increases the forces of greed in our reactive mind and we go after it. So it creates a big turmoil, and the amount of stress and amount of strain we get in dealing with these things, the mind is not able to deal. If it is strong enough, it will deal to some extent, but when it goes beyond control, the mind just surrenders, and then finally the mind breaks. It comes to a point when the stress levels are so much. I mean, the stress level, it is just like in any other element. You know, if you take mm, a metal and go on hammering it continuously, they have a thing known as tensile stress. Even the material, those who know material science, they have a word has been invented, metal fatigue. If you constantly twist a metal, then due to fatigue, it will simply break. So the same rule applies to our mind also. Mind is subtle matter. Remember, thoughts are subtle matter. They are as gross, they are maybe less gross than matter, but it follows the same properties. So just as a metal, if it is constantly subject to change, constantly subject to hammering, then one day the metal will simply give up, it will snap. So also the mind also, if it is not controlled, the reactive mind is not controlled by buddhi, you don't gain power over the mind, then it has also got the forces of the mind, the energy level of the mind, the stress and strain which the mind can bear has a limit, and beyond that the mind also breaks down. So that's why we say we have a mental breakdown, or some stress levels increase. So the same thing happens in our indriyas, even the organs. If it is misused or overused, the organs also get a kind of fatigue, and then you feel dull, you feel depressed. So any kind of misuse or lack of control of any of the five organs, the Gyanendriyas or Karmendriyas, or even the objects, the Pancha Mahabhutas, as I told you, the five Tanmatras and the five Bhutas, the subtle elements and the gross elements, the subtle forces and the gross material. Subtle forces, as I told you, fire and all those things, these are subtle forces, but they are also a kind of material, gross material. When it is converted, it is burnt, it becomes fire, it gives rise to energy. So all the tanmatras also are made of force and energy. So also our mind has this, it has its own energy level, it has its own state of subtlety. The more subtle the mind, the more the reactive mind is the grossest part of our mind, and that is the cause of all our root cause of all our problems. Because they are attached to the gross, they are as volatile and as flexible and as much subject to stress and strain as the objects. Just as you twist a wire continuously, it is subject to wear and tear. You can't expect that wire to bear the load always. There is a limit to the load. So also the mind has a limit. So what do? We go, the lower can be controlled by the higher, just as material can be controlled by the forces of nature. You can control a kg of uranium can give you, if it is converted into energy, a huge amount of energy. So an intelligent conversion of matter into energy can help you fight nature, can help you generate energy, can help you do so many things. But so also our reactive mind, a careful control, and if all the energies of the reactive mind are not wasted, and all the energies of the senses, the subtle senses, the Gyanendriyas, which are eyes, ears, they also have a capacity. So before we discuss what this Savitarka Samadhi is, we have to decide on what object we should meditate upon. The lower the object on which you meditate, the lower your gain will be. So, but Patanjali is giving us all the possibilities, because people who run after wealth, people who run after many gross things, they also are concentrating, but their concentration is misplaced. And the grosser their concentration, the more suffering they have to undergo. So that's a very simple logic. So Patanjali gives us the choice. He says you can go in for Savitarka Samadhi, the forces of nature, and those forces of nature impact upon the mind and it is sent back as thought. So thought is also a subtle kind of force with which we are interacting with the whole world, with people. You see the impact the thought force has on our destinies. It is something which cannot be neglected. Just as heat, cold, and other forces of nature, gravitation, electricity, we study so much about them. The whole of science and technology is nothing but a study of the subtle forces of nature. And we claim that we have mastered that to a certain extent. We know how to use the fuel energy to move fast. We have planes, we have rockets, we have energy we can generate energy, provide electricity, provide light, provide cooling, provide heating, and do so many things by manipulating nature and the gross as well as the forces, the material nature and the forces, the tanmatras and the bhutas, pancha mahabhutas and pancha tanmatras. That is what science is doing. Then we come to the science of the mind, which is known as psychology. There we are dealing with the different states of the mind. So Patanjali's main concern is how to deal with the states of the mind, because that is a subject which we have neglected for years and years together. It does not form part of our curriculum. That is why you will find absolutely amazing developments in academic on the academic side, but at the same time that same person is not able to handle the forces of his mind. He can handle forces in the laboratory, he can handle lasers, he can handle nuclear energy if he's a nuclear scientist, he can even handle the prana of a human being if he's a doctor, if he's an anesthetist, if he does anesthesia, he can even control the consciousness, the awareness of a human being. So science has taught him so many things in the external world which can be controlled. But you ask a doctor or a scientist to control somebody else's mind, to solve some problems which he is facing. No, you say no, you have to go to the psychiatrist. Psychiatrist also attempts. If he is not successful, as most of the Western psychology is dependent on drugs, he will ask him to take some tablets which change the physiological process. Their solution is gross, but it is like putting the cart before the horse. The horse should lead the cart. So we don't use our buddhi to control the mind. Using the body to control the mind by giving medicines is like putting the cart before the horse. The horse, the right place for the horse is before the cart. The horse should pull the cart. Cart is a inert thing. So that is what we are trying to attempt. We are attempting to do the impossible. We are trying to put the cart before the horse and expect the cart to move. The right place for the horse is in front of the cart, not behind the cart. The cart should not be before the horse. So horse has to pull because horse is more sentient, more intelligent. So also when we deal with the mind, unfortunately the psychologists, sometimes it may be necessary to give some medicines and some tranquilizers and other things, but ultimately they ruin a person. So any approach towards control of the mind by something which is lower than the mind, which is more gross than the mind, is going to end in failure. So at some stage or the other, the will, the ego, and the mahat or the buddhi should take care of handling the mind. We should pass on the control of the mind to the buddhi. So buddhi is a higher kind of a subtle part of the mind. It is part of prakriti, no doubt. It is not the purusha, but being closest to the purusha, which is Brahman, which is our Ishta, which is the God whom we worship, the eternal. The light of that consciousness is reflected more in the buddhi than in the manas. So it's a very, very simple logic. Why we can't handle our lives? Because we have given the control of our mind to lower things, to gross things. And these gross things will ultimately drag it down. That is the tendency. It's the tendency of the gross to drag down anything subtle above it. Whereas it's a tendency of the more subtle thing to pull the gross things which are below them. So the higher you go, it is just like air. When you heat it, the more the force or more the energy, the air rises up, it goes up. The colder the air, it comes down. The grosser a thing, it goes down. It has a tendency to uh, become more and more inert and cause more and more problems. So the whole idea of spirituality is to take the gross existence to the subtle existence, the subtle existence to the still subtler existence, and take it, use the ego, the ripe ego, to catch hold of the manas and control it, and don't allow it, just as we don't allow the forces of nature and the material that you see around us, the gross material and the subtle forces, we keep them under control. Otherwise, they will come and destroy us. We have to control the heat. Everything has a sort of control engineering which we have to do. Everything has to be controlled. The most simple energy like fire, like steam, unless there is a control mechanism, it can be destructive. That's what nature has shown us. Wherever there is no control, there is destruction. So everything, even the water that we stop, the dam that we try to use to control water, if it is not regulated, if the control mechanism is not there, sometimes the overflow may simply crash the dam and destroy the dam. So when we are so careful when we handle the forces of gross nature, but do we have the same kind of concern when we are handling the forces of the mind? Unfortunately not, because we don't give it a, a priority in our life. That is what Raj Yoga tries to do. It tells us again and again, give the control of your reactive mind to the higher mind. And if you don't do it when there is still time, then you will be at the mercy of the gross. You will be at the mercy of the sense organ, the Gyanendriya, Karmendriya, the Pancha Mahabhutas, and the subtle bhutas and the tanmatras, the subtle elements. They are always waiting to drag the mind. So mind is, as it were, the manas. At the level of the manas, it is torn between the gross universe below and the more subtler universe above, that is the ego, ahankara, buddhi, and the mahat is the universal. So when we meditate on a universal mind of the Ishta or God, because God is supposed to be a combination of all the individual jivas, the individual mind. So when you surrender yourself to the Ishta, spirituality means you have a capacity, your buddhi has a capacity. It cannot pull the lower mind. The lower mind is helpless. Sometimes it is dragged down. So to pull it, your buddhi is not enough. So you have to hook your wagon, hitch your wagon to a higher buddhi, which is the Ishta, or the God whom you worship. Whether you call him God, whether you call him Brahman, whether you call him Purusha, the pure consciousness. Once you are your control, the control of your life, the control of your mind mainly, not the other things. The other gross things we take enough care. We take enough care of our bodies, we take enough care of our health, we take enough care of the biological things around us. We are so particular about this. The food, we are so concerned about the health, we are concerned about so many things. But what about mental health? What about the mind? So mind also has a tendency to be stressed, to be strained, to have fatigue. So we have to take enough care or equal care or more care of the mind. So that can be done only by two faculties of Prakriti, which are higher than uh, the manas, the reactive mind, and that is Ahankara and Buddhi. So the Ahankara, which pushes you down because of the pride you have about your possession of wealth and all the gross things, That is known as kacha ami, the ego that makes you safe and secure on the lower things. So that drags you down to the animal level. The animal is happy if it has stored certain food. The ant is happy not knowing that suppose somebody else comes and takes away all your food, you will be starving. So the animal has faith in the gross, but very often we find the gross is snatched away by nature from him. So from that animal. So the faith in the gross is a tendency which we have to counter by having faith in the subtle, the higher things. And if we give the control to them, to the higher consciousness, to the higher mind, to the buddhi, to the ankara, the pakami or the ripe ego, which says, I am connected to the God, I'm connected to the eternal, I'm connected to the supreme consciousness, which is more powerful than all the lower categories, then the mind has a tendency to rise higher and higher in the evolution. That is what this whole sutra, beyond that, beyond all the 24 categories that we described now, starting from Mahat, the Buddhi, the lower mind, the Manas, and then the Gunas, and then the Manas, which are, and then the Indriyas, the Gyanendriyas, Karmendriyas. So, all the 24 categories of Prakriti, the lower we go, the more we suffer. The higher we go, the more we become free. The earlier we hand our control, the control of our personality to a higher reality in us, which is the Buddhi, or above the Buddhi also. When we go to the Mahat, the universal mind, when we pray to God, we are actually praying to an Ishvara whose universal mind is very powerful. So if our individual buddhi is not strong enough, the Mahat is strong enough to pull us from. That's why in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Tesham aham samudharta mrityu sansara sagarat. A person who is drowning in the ocean of samsara, the gross prakriti, I pull him. How does he pull? He pull by pulling, because of the buddhi which has been connected to the universal buddhi. Aham means the Lord Krishna or Lord, the God whom we worship. His Mahat or his universal mind pulls us and doesn't allow us to sink into the gross and get destroyed. So that is the idea behind all our efforts, spiritual efforts. So there must be something before creation, which is known as avyakta. So before creation has become gross, it is known as avyakta, the parama prakriti, the avyakta, to which creation slowly becomes gross, and after an end of a cycle, the whole nature, the whole gross nature goes back to the avyakta. So also in our individual life, we have come back from our divine state, from pure consciousness, we became the avyakta, we became the Mahat, the Buddhi further degenerated. It became the Manas, the lower mind. Then first it became the ego. Then it became the whole unmanifested state, which was pure consciousness. Prakriti started coming down. It started becoming grosser and grosser and grosser, and the Purusha, the essence of intelligence or pure consciousness, was far away. Then the cycle, when you go down, you come to a point when you suffer so much that you feel that we have made a mistake, and then it returns. As soon as we begin to know a thing, we get power over it, and when the mind starts meditating on different elements, which starts with the lower elements, it starts with trying to get power by wealth, by power, by conquering, and by so many things. But when he finds, when even an emperor like Alexander, when he found that at the end of his life, very short life, when he found that though he had conquered everything, he could not take anything away with him. So once he tries to conquer the gross, he gives up. He tries to conquer the subtle, he gives up. Then he conquers the subtler things, and then when he finally conquers, uh, he gets the knowledge of the pure consciousness. He gains power over the whole universe, the Mahat. So the higher the element, Savitarka means Savitarka Samadhi means you meditate on any object. Now the object you have to choose. You meditate on money, you get money. You get the powers associated with money, not beyond that. So whatever money can buy you, it may buy you many things, but it will not buy you good health. Then you meditate on good health, on the body, on the physical processes, and do some kind of asanas and yoga, pranayama. Then you develop a good body. You are running after money, but money is not everything, because money, uh, they say there's a proverb: if money is lost, nothing is lost. If health is lost, something is lost. But if character is lost, then everything is lost. The mind is lost, everything is lost, because then money or the health, good health, will not save you if the character or the mind is not under your control. So when we start meditating on the lower things in the universe, it starts gaining power. That is known as Savitarka. Vitarka means with question. We question the elements, we question atomic energy, we question fire, and we make discoveries. It's very good. I'm not saying science is bad. They may give their truths and their powers behind that, but there is a limit. Whoever meditates on that, that is Savitarka. But according to Patanjali, that will not give you liberation. It is a worldly search after finer and finer enjoyments. And when you realize, when you go to the bottom of the gross universe, when you find that all search for enjoyment in the senses and in the objects of the senses, you when you go down to an extent, when you find that it is not satisfying you, then you take the upward turn and getting all the subtle powers, the occult powers. Occult powers means what? Powers over elements. That is what science is. When you say something flying, when the people never knew what flying was, they just saw the birds. They thought, yes, it's a great power if we had the power to fly. But somehow the human mind discovered the planes. Then he found that we can also fly with a speed faster than that of the birds, than that of the animals, than that of the horse. We can go faster than that. So the occult powers, these are, you may say, some kind of occult powers. We did Savitarka meditation, Savitarka with question. We questioned the elements. We went on a spirit of inquiry. The spirit of inquiry is common thing. Whether you meditate on the objects, whether you meditate on the mind, whether you meditate on the spirit, you have to ask questions. The Upanishads also ask questions, but they ask questions about the subtle things, whereas the elements ask you whereas the scientist asks questions about the gross things. So science developed because the Savitarka Samadhi, the powers which we got, Swamiji says, the Patanjali says here, Savitarka Samadhi is the knowledge that you gain by intense concentration or focus on the gross elements. Though if you focus on the finer elements or the forces, you develop different types of energy, different types of uh, physical energy, then there are other energies. But if you focus on the mind, you develop mental energies, you get mental skills to manipulate things, but still they are powers all the same. So in the end, they intensify your powers, but they intensify your suffering also. So the a person who hoards money gains many things, many gross things, but he also has a kind of suffering. He is afraid of theft. He is afraid of how to control his money. But the higher he goes, he gets more powers, and he gets powers over mind and powers over other people. He starts dominating, becomes a politician, or maybe rules a kingdom, or he controls some organization, he controls people, he finds more joy. But even that will come to an end only when he overlooks or maybe discards these powers or doesn't run after them and runs after the higher things, controlling one's own mind, controlling the buddhi, the mahat. Then uh, his spiritual qualities start manifesting, and he gets more and more power over the gross, but which he doesn't use. he gets power so that they don't dominate. When Sri Ramakrishna suffered, the pain in the body could not dominate him. Just as any other person would be crying in pain, he could detach his mind from the gross because he had controlled his reactive mind. There was no reaction in his mind. So that kind of samadhi, Savitarka samadhi, on higher and higher categories of Prakriti is what is being discussed here. Then we will discuss the other types of samadhi. So if there are some questions, we will just, you can ask them in the chat. Yeah. Yeah, there is a question. Should we be using our individual buddhi or the universal buddhi to make decisions on in our daily life? It's a very good question. This, yeah, you have to use your individual buddhi till your link with the universal buddhi or mahat is established. Your dependence on God, our dependence on God, or we think we are wise. We go to God or we go to a higher intelligence only when we find we are lacking in intelligence. But if a person thinks he is wise enough, as many rationalists say, or as many people say, I know everything. The ego convinces him that he knows the solution to all the problems. He may be making mistakes every minute of his life, but he still thinks that I can do better. I have the capacity to do better. I will do better. And I can manipulate things, people, and everything around me. So the lower buddhi, the lower mind, deceives a person. The buddhi, as soon as the buddhi starts awakening, we have to use the individual mind. But when we see that our individual buddhi also is incapable of taking the right decisions, then we connect it to a higher intelligence, that is the Ishta. And we try to establish a kind of link so that we have access to a higher buddhi. We can see things we do not see, whether it is a guru or whether it is a Ishta or a object, a person whom you revere, any person whose buddhi is more than you. It's not necessary that one should always depend on God, because it's very difficult to understand the mahat or the universal mind. It takes lot of sadhana to, or japa, to continuously attune yourself to the universal mind. But till then we take the help of slightly higher minds. That is what satsang does. Satsang helps you to at least take the advice of somebody who has raised his level of buddhi slightly above us. It can be anybody, it can be a friend, it can be somebody whom you trust, somebody whose buddhi has really, who has shown that he is capable of taking the right decisions at the right time. That is why we find a human guru. Though he is not ultimate, we have to try to, with the human guru's help, or with the human uh, person, the human, even avatars, they are the doorways to the higher discrimination, doorways to Brahman. So we catch hold of some tangible reality which we can understand, a human reality, an avatara who has come down in a human form, and we try to superimpose the consciousness of Brahman or Purusha on that. And when we do that, we have access to the knowledge he has, the discrimination Thakur has, the discrimination these incarnations and saints have, and that helps us to. So, your question whether we should depend on our buddhi or the universal buddhi, we have to depend on our buddhi. First, develop that buddhi by meditation. Higher the buddhi, the more it feels that it is lacking in true wisdom. So it tries to tag itself or be in the company of somebody who helps. Just as when you are ignorant, we don't know, you get hold of a technician to solve. If you don't know much about electricity, you call an electrician who is much more advanced than you in that field. So also when our buddhi falls short, we are not able to take the right decision at the right time, and maybe we take decisions and they prove to be wrong, then we have to take the help of somebody who has a higher buddhi, or tag ourselves to the Mahat, the universe. So both are necessary. Yeah. Yeah. Now the second is, uh, we grew up hearing that body tires but mind never tires. But mind, being a subtle matter, is subject to all changes. Body is subject to, it is no different. Yes, definitely the mind also tires. You have seen it. When you have stress and strain, the mind becomes tired. People are incapable of thinking. I have seen many times when we discuss a very abstruse subject, people just don't want to think. They said, make it simple, or the brain has doesn't have the capacity to think now. Please leave me alone. I can't think. I can't. That is because of tiredness. When the mind is fresh, it understands higher ideas. That's why they say when you get up in the morning, it's the best time to meditate, because when you come back tired after work, and you just with that tired mind, you can't have creative and fresh ideas. So the mind also gets tired. It's a subtle matter. Remember that. Just as the gross universe has its uh, stress and strain and the limitations, the energy levels of certain fuel, even a fuel, when the car runs for a, it has its own wear and tear. It's a solid object and it is run by fuel. The fuel goes and then it slows down. Similarly, when the prana also becomes weak, the mind also becomes weak. The mind becomes weak, the prana becomes weak. It has a uh, effect on the body also, and you become dull. So you have to remember that nobody said the mind never tires. Mind also tires if it is misused, or if it is uh, unnecessarily the I mean the reactive mind is that which tires. The buddhi never tires. The higher you go, it never tires. But the most of the tired feeling you get in the mind, which is then conveyed to the prana and to the body, is the reactive mind. The too much of thoughts, too much of reactions, too much of confusion, too much of wrong thoughts, too much of gross thoughts, they are all responsible. Now, there is another request to explain again the analogy of cart and the horse. Now, the cart and the horse, you see, the horse should be pulling the cart or the carriage. So, putting the cart before the horse means the right place for the horse is to pull the cart. But if you remove the cart and put the horse behind, then it is very difficult. The horse cannot push it, it is easy to pull. So, normally the cart is always behind the horse. So, also our mind, the reactive mind, it should be pulled by the buddhi. In that context, I said the cart should be behind the horse. Horse is the buddhi in a way, and the cart is the thing, the reactive mind or the mind, the manas or the body and the indriyas. All the subsequent things you can compare it to a cart. Now, the problem is we try to control the mind by giving some kind of medicines, tranquilizers, and all, and then we think that taking those will help us to calm the mind. It may help for some, just as a horse may push the cart to some distance, but it can't do justice. Its natural ways in front of the cart. So you can't use the body and the sense organs and all the gross things to push up the mind. You have to use the buddhi, which is like a horse, to pull the manas, the reactive mind, and the body and everything. So the stronger your buddhi, the more you meditate, the more you do sadhana, the buddhi becomes more and more powerful. The higher mind becomes more and more powerful and becomes capable to pull the whole carriage. The whole carriage is our body and our reactive mind and the organs. So all these things require a lot of strength, and only a sharp mind, a mind which is sharpened by spiritual sadhana alone, can drag and pull it forward. That is the idea. Okay. People with high IQ have more buddhi. So they still have the reactive mind and have manas. Yes, definitely. With high IQ doesn't, it is just a highly reactive mind. That's all. It's a reactive mind all the same. See, when you say buddhi, when you use the Bengali word buddhi and when you use the Sanskrit word buddhi, there's a huge difference. You see, when you say use your buddhi means use your intelligence, the gross intelligence. That is not what I mean by buddhi. The higher buddhi is a higher faculty which gives you a discrimination. But high IQ means you are having a better manas than others. You have a reactive mind which understands, which can distinguish between gross things. See, high IQ means what? You can distinguish between figures, analogies, and words. You can manipulate gross things very easily. That is high IQ. Unfortunately, a high IQ person can be one of the most stupid spiritually. He can be the most worldly person and not know anything how to deal with his emotions. So, a person with high IQ is often found to be emotionally imbalanced or unbalanced, and most of the crime or most of the suicides and other things are done not by innocent people, by simple people. They are done by people with high IQ because they have misplaced their uh, manas or the reactive mind and thought that it can solve all the problems. So having a high IQ does not mean the buddhi has been awakened. In common Bengali or common Marathi or any other Indian language, when you say, oh, he is a very buddhiman person, we think a person with a high IQ has more buddhi. He doesn't have more buddhi in the spiritual sense. He has buddhi in the worldly sense, which is nothing but a refined manas. He is still at the level of the manas. He has a refined manas, and sometimes the refined manas can be more harmful than an ordinary manas. A simple village person who has no confusion and leads an uncomplicated life is less likely to commit suicide. That's why you find the highest rates of suicides in countries which have very high IQ. Japan, Switzerland, and there are many countries where Sweden, for example, where the IQ level is very high. They have given so much of importance. They have put the cart before the horse. They have given manas more importance than the buddhi. So that is not buddhi. You have to make a distinction between the spiritual buddhi and the buddhi as it is understood in colloquial language. Okay. Can the buddhi be pulled by the energy of bhakti, or is bhakti grace of God through sadhana? Bhakti is nothing but a way, a means to get emotionally attached to the Mahat or the universal mind. So it can definitely pull. Bhakti is a very natural way. You either use jnana, that is thoughts, to connect yourself with the universal mind. You use your will, that is Raj Yoga, to connect yourself with the Purusha, or you use bhakti, use your emotions. So there are different aspects of the reactive mind. The emotional part, if is more predominant, then it is that attachment with the higher reality or Purusha or Brahman or Ishta or incarnation is known as bhakti. If you are predominantly emotional, if you are predominantly thoughtful and using your thoughts to connect yourself with the divine, then you are a jnani. And if you use your willpower, if you use your self control, the control of the will to meditate, then you either use karma yoga or raj yoga to fulfill or to connect with the higher reality. So that is how it has to be interpreted. So it is that is the grace of God, either through bhakti or through jnana or through raj yoga or through karma yoga. Whatever be the means, the buddhi becomes more and more subtle and it gets attached to the universal buddhi or mahat. Okay. So I take your leave now. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishnaarpanamastu. So tomorrow there will be Gita class on Saturday. Every alternate Saturday we have a Gita class.